DA leader John Steenhuisen is holding a virtual briefing to update South Africans on the progress towards the Democratic Alliance's Moonshot Pact formation and the arrangements for a national convention on the Moonshot Pact. On the 3rd of this month, the DA extended a hand of friendship and cooperation to all non-ANC EFF-aligned political parties. This was to consider joining a united Moonshot Pact ahead of next year's general elections. Let's take you there now.
Than to say to you today that things are definitely going to get better. But the reality is that they can still get much, much worse. Since I last spoke to you from the floor of the DA Congress, the ANC Premier of Gauteng has now publicly confirmed that his party's goal is to form a doomsday coalition with the EFF after the 2024 election. Now, we must never forget why the EFF was kicked out of the ANC in the first place. It was because the EFF's leaders were too radical, too corrupt, and too violent, even for the ANC. In their desperation to hang on to power, the ANC has now confirmed that it plans to sell out to a coalition that will ultimately dance to the EFF's tune. Make no mistake, this will seal our country's doom. But despite the very real risk we face of an ANC-EFF coalition, there is reason for hope. Firstly, ANC support is crumbling. The DA now routinely polls within 12 percentage points of the ANC. And the DA is working every day to close this gap further so that we can overtake the ANC and become the single biggest political party in South Africa. But even as we work towards this historic achievement, the DA recognizes that South Africans demand even more of us as the official opposition. They demand that we not only make the DA as big as possible, but that we also provide a credible path to victory in 2024 so that we can defeat the ANC and keep the EFF out. They demand that we put country before party. In fact, they demand this not only of the DA, but of every opposition party that stands opposed to the ANC and the EFF. It is precisely this reason, to put our country first, that the DA extended a hand of friendship and cooperation to the leaders of like-minded opposition parties 2 weeks ago. The prospect of a united opposition working hand in hand to grow the combined non-ANC and EFF vote to 50% plus one offers another reason for hope. And that is why we must do everything in our power to forge a strong and lasting pact against the ANC and EFF. And I can today report back that the Moonshot Pact is indeed starting to take shape. In total, we have now corresponded with the leaders of 15 different organizations, asking them to join us in the effort to form a pre-election Moonshot Pact. The only opposition leaders who were not invited are those who are currently aligned to the ANC and the EFF. In the spirit of unity and cooperation, the invitation was also not limited to parties already represented in Parliament or in municipal councils. Newly formed parties and movements who have not yet contested elections are more than welcome to join the pact. I have already written to the leaders of all of these parties to thank them for their responses, as well as their very valuable suggestions on how to make the pact a success. The following 6 party leaders have thus far agreed to attend the National Convention for the Moonshot Pact. Mr. Velenkosini Shlabisa from the Inkatha Freedom Party. Mr. Herman Mashaba from Action South Africa. Mr. Ahmed Sheikh Imam from the National Freedom Party. Dr. Pieter Groenewald from the Freedom Front Plus, Mr. Neil de Beer from the United Independent Movement, and of course myself representing the Democratic Alliance. During the 2021 local government elections, a third of all voters cast their ballot for one of these parties. Our task now is to grow this pact support from a third to just over half of all votes in 2024. In addition to parties that have already agreed, Mr. Musi Maimane from Build One South Africa and Mr. Songezo Zibi from Rise Mzansi have suggested that they are still considering their responses. Leaders from the African Independent Congress, African Transformation Movement, Abantu Batho Congress, Pan-African Congress, and Minority Front are yet to respond. And I want to make it clear that this door remains wide open for all of them to take their rightful place around the negotiating table. I'm hopeful that they will soon join the rest of us, because we can never shut the door on South Africa. Unfortunately, however, I must report that the following three party leaders have rejected the plea for cooperation. Reverend Kenneth Meshwe from the African Christian Democratic Party, General Bantu Holomisa from the United Democratic Movement, and Mr. Bongani Boloyi from Chiluva. While I absolutely respect the right of these leaders to determine their own way forward for their parties, I do ask them to please reconsider. And if you are a supporter or a donor of these parties, please use your voice to help encourage us all to unite in the interests of this country that we all love. After all, we know that the only way to ever defeat the ANC is for South Africans from different backgrounds to come together. The ANC thrives on the divisions within our society. And we all know that the only way we will ever be able to rebuild our country is if South Africans stand united in our diversity on our way towards achieving a common goal. Yet, how can we as political leaders expect the people to do something that we ourselves are not yet prepared to do? And that's why I implore you, let us lead by example. Let's now cast aside our petty differences and stand together as one pact, united in our diversity, and work towards that shared goal of unseating the ANC. To those leaders who have said no to the pact, I ask that you unclench your fists so that we may take hands and work together for South Africa. On a more hopeful note, I can also report that various party leaders have made massively helpful and constructive suggestions to ensure the success of any negotiations. I draw huge inspiration from the knowledge that these leaders share the dream of a strong and cohesive pact to deliver our country from the threat of an ANC-EFF doomsday. I do, however, wish to re-emphasize the importance of the need for party leaders themselves to negotiate the contents of the pact. It is for the leaders of organizations to get around the table at the National Convention to set out the vision for the pact. The work of crafting this agreement is simply far too important to be delegated or neglected in any way. Nonetheless, as a sign of the profound respect and good faith with which the DA and myself approach this initiative, I will be reaching out to each leader who has agreed to join our initiative to ask for a personal face-to-face meeting. This will be an opportunity for us to forge the personal bonds that we will need to work together and to discuss any suggestions as well as reservations or concerns that may yet remain. I look forward very much to these engagements over the coming weeks. My fellow South Africans, if all goes well, the National Convention for the Moonshot Pact will be held during the upcoming winter. This is going to be a dark winter that will test our nation's resolve like never before. I know that you and your families face escalating load shedding, the prospect of a complete grid collapse, violent crime, as well as surging poverty and unemployment on a daily basis. But the prospect of a united opposition, setting aside our petty differences in service of South Africa, can offer a powerful ray of light during this dark winter. For the very first time since 1994, the ANC is likely to lose next year's election. Victory is within our grasp if we only have the courage to now seize the opportunity. And that is why any party that is serious about fixing the mess we find ourselves in should get on board with the pact so that we get every single voter to turn out on election day. It's now in our hands to rise above the petty politics and to nurture the relationships between all parties that want to defeat the ANC, keep the EFF out, and get our country onto a new trajectory of hope and prosperity. This is an endeavor in which we dare not fail, and it is an endeavor that should excite, motivate, and encourage every person who wants to save this country to go onto the IEC website and register to vote today. Because the choice we face when the ANC loses its majority is simple. It is the decisions made by voters during next year's election that will either seal South Africa's doom by yielding an ANC-EFF coalition, or it will lead towards a better future by inaugurating a pact government that can finally save South Africa. Thank you very much.
Right, there you have it there, DA leader John Steenhuisen just giving developments around the DA's Moonshot Pact there as announced at the party's Federal Congress, which happened just a week or so ago, and of course just touching base with members of the public there, also naming some of the parties that have agreed to come onto the discussion table. He says the IFP, Action SA, NFP, FF+, UIM have agreed to come onto the discussion table. However, the ACDP, UDM as well as Chiluva have refused the invitation to come on to the discussion table. We will be keeping an eye on this for you as and when it continues to develop.